Hi, welcome to Valley View University. I'd like to thank everyone for joining tonight. I'm Jessica Galgiani. I'm a physical therapist here at Outpatient Rehabilitation.
I'm Noel Armstrong. I'm a podiatrist at ValleyOrtho.
I'm Maria Garcia. I'm a certified athletic trainer for ValleyOrtho, and I work closely with Dr. Armstrong.
And I've been asked just to mention a few housekeeping items. First of all, you can submit questions through the Q&A chat on the bottom of your screen. Your question will be answered live, but at the end of the presentation, and we'll try our best to answer all of your questions. And just so you know, we're unable to answer questions regarding personal health information, so please don't share any personal health information in the chat. And with that, let's talk about foot and ankle injury prevention for returning to the trails.
And I'll be back for the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. So for the last couple of months, we've been doing things that kind of look like this picture over here on the left. Our feet have been in these rigid boots. We've been stepping or sliding over snow, and our feet have been even strapped to boards and skis. So that's very different from how we're going to be using our feet and ankles in just a month or so when the snow melts and the mud dries up and we can get back on the trails. So when I think about going back to the trails, I think about stepping on many different kinds of surfaces, rocks and grass. I think about shoe wear that's a lot more compliant and lets your feet move a lot better. And I think about movements that are more plyometric and varied in nature. And so right now is a really good time to think about what we might be able to do to help prepare our feet and ankles for this transition and hopefully keep ourselves injury-free in the coming months when we go back to running and hiking on those trails. So it's a good thing to think about because foot and ankle injuries are common in people who run and hike. Some of the most common kinds of injuries are plantar fasciitis and Achilles tendinopathy. And then on that traumatic spectrum of injuries, ankle sprains have a pretty high incidence. And so in order to think about what we can do to prevent some of these injuries, let's zoom out a little bit and look at what these feet and ankles are actually doing for us. So number one, they are shock absorbers. The graph that I've shown here on the left is the vertical ground reaction forces of a stepping cycle in the top trace and a running stride cycle in the bottom trace. So with walking, you can see that it has two peaks. One peak corresponds with when your heel hits the ground, and the other peak corresponds when your toes push off. When you're running, you just have that one peak. Everything's kind of condensed into one vertical ground reaction force. We're doing this over and over again. So it's very, there's a lot of repetition if you think about how many steps you take when you go on your typical hike. And those forces are high. So every step sees a ground reaction forces of 120% of your body weight when you're walking, and even higher when you're running. It can be up to 275%. And the feet and the ankles are seeing that load first. And so they have to be really good at helping us manage that force. So for that, you need to have strong muscles. You also have to have some good flexibility in the joints of your feet and ankles to manage that force successfully. Your feet and ankles are also really important for propulsion, or pushing your body forward with every step. So you need some power in those muscles to help you push off. And we typically think of the ankle plantar flexors, or your calf muscles, as being super important for that propulsion. So force and power are important, but also mobility. So if you can get your foot and ankle into the right position, then you can take advantage of some natural efficiency in the body. These biomechanical levers are formed. And if you can use those, then that makes your push off a lot more efficient so that those calf muscles don't have to work so hard. And finally, our feet and ankles help keep us balanced. This is a line that I've stolen from Dr. Armstrong. He likes to point out how unusual it is that humans walk around on 2 feet. And we're so used to seeing people do that that we forget how complex bipedalism really is. It's no easy feat to stay balanced on your 2 feet. The feet and ankles do a lot for us in that regards. So here, mobility is really important. The feet and ankles help us conform to a wide variety of different surfaces. And they also have good proprioceptors. So that's sensory receptors in the feet and the ankle that give us information about where you are in space so that we can react quickly when we step on something unexpected or the ground shifts unexpectedly underneath us. So in this regard, you know that mobility is really important, but again, also strength to help power that quick reflex to correct us when we're losing our balance. So it's no surprise that with feet and ankles doing all this work for us, they're pretty complex. We have lots of muscles, lots of tendons, lots of bones, lots of joints, a lot to manage down there. I've included this picture on the right just to kind of give you an idea of how busy it is. And what I'd like you to appreciate is this is not even all of them. A lot of those muscles and tendons have actually been stripped out of this diagram so that you can just focus on some of them at a time. So there's a lot going on. And the feet and ankles do these jobs really well when each of these players in the system is doing their job well. We start to see problems where when some of these parts of the system aren't doing their job as well as they should. And another really amazing thing about people is when something's broken, it's not like you just can't walk. The body will let you keep walking, but there's a cost there. We are able to compensate a lot, but sometimes that compensation can help lead to injury. So one of the keystones of keeping us injury-free is trying to make sure that each of the parts of the system is really doing its job. So in that vein, what I'd like to talk about tonight are some exercises that you can do at home to work on your mobility, your strength, and your ankle stability to hopefully help keep you injury-free. A couple of things I'd like to mention that are also really important to injury prevention, but that I don't have enough time to talk about tonight are gradual training programs, so not doing too much too fast, and then having good shoes. So first, let's talk a little bit about mobility. I've shown this cartoon of a runner, and we think about the ankle needed to get in a good position. But what I'd like you to notice about this cartoon character is what is happening at the hip. So forget about the feet for a minute. In order to take that stride, you have to be able to get your leg in front of you. So that means you need decent hamstring length to allow your hip to bend like that. Then, as you're getting ready for push-off and your body's passing over your standing leg, you need to be able to get your leg behind you. So you need to have sufficient hip extension mobility as well. So lack of these hip mobility can lead to strain in the foot. So they are just as important as stretching the ankle and the toes. So I'm going to have Maria demonstrate a couple of stretches for you now. So Maria's going to start with the hamstring stretch. Yep, so she's going to put the leg out in front. She's going to make sure her back stays really flat, and she can even use a light touch on here so that she can just focus on stretching and doesn't need to worry about her balance. And she's going to hinge forward from the hips with a nice flat back until she feels a comfortable stretch in the back of her leg. Typically, I'd have her hold this for 20 to 30 seconds, but we're kind of just going to move through these to keep it moving for her tonight. Okay, so now she's going to put that left foot behind her in a lunge to stretch her calf muscle. Good. And then she's making sure that her back leg is very straight. And then she's also going to let that heel really press to the ground to make sure that she is stretching her calf muscle. Again, she would hold this. And now in this position is actually a really good place to get a hip flexor stretch. So she can relax the back knee just a little bit, enough to drop her tail and kind of lift the front of her hips. Good, and you feel a stretch across the front of your hips. So there you have that hip flexor stretch. And then go ahead and switch legs so that one gets a break. For the soleus, that's the second muscle that we have in the calf. She's going to lunge, but she's going to bend her back knee now, still pressing her heel to the floor, and that's going to stretch that other big calf muscle, the soleus. Finally, she's going to stretch her big toe by lifting her heel way high up, bending that back knee until she feels, and she can put, you can even sink back and put a little weight in it to feel a stretch. And there's just a basic, quick rundown of some stretches you can do for the legs and the feet that'll kind of hit all those different points of the gait cycle. So we've talked a little bit about mobility. Now I'd like to talk about strength and power for push-off. So we'll go back to the slides. Okay, so when we think about push-off, we're usually thinking about our calf muscles. They do a lot of that for us. So the two leaders are your gastrocnemius and your soleus. Those are the big calf muscles that you can see. And they're both connected to the heel bone through the Achilles tendon. So they are helping you with ankle plantar flexion. So that's that push-off motion of the ankle. And they're big and they're strong, and that's what we feel a lot of the time when we're running or hiking uphill. However, those smaller muscles that play a supporting role in propulsion are also really important. So those smaller guys are your toe flexors, your flexor hallucis longus, your tibialis posterior, and your flexor digitorum longus. They also assist with ankle plantar flexion. So they're not as big and they're not as strong, but they do play a really important supporting role. And if they're not helping out, that can lead to some of these overuse injuries, such as calf strains or Achilles tendinopathy. So in a moment, I will talk about how to modify your heel rise exercise to make sure you're bringing in some of those other smaller muscles as well to support the function of the larger ones. But before I do that, I'd like to mention one more thing, and that is the importance of your foot intrinsic muscles. So these are little guys that almost nobody spends any time thinking about. They're tiny, there's tons of them, you've got multiple layers of them in your feet, and they connect those little toe bones to each other. These play a super important role in kind of supporting the shape of your foot and helping you cushion that landing, but they are also really important part of that propulsion chain. The bar graph on the right is from this really cool study where they had people do foot strengthening exercises. They didn't have them do any heel rises or plantar flexor strengtheners. They just worked on the strength in those feet. And without doing anything else, their heel rise got better. So that shows you that even though none of these muscles cross the ankle joint, they play a really important supporting role in your heel rise, and therefore we can't ignore them when we're talking about propulsion. So I want to start with some of those foot exercises. So Maria's going to take off her shoe, and we're going to try to zoom in so we can get a better look at the foot. Okay, so let's see here. All right, and if you could turn that way, like face your toes that way. Yes, it's okay. You can leave one shoe. Okay, yeah, that's okay. So the first exercise is spreading and pressing. So Maria's advanced, so she's going to do this in a standing position, but if you've never done this before, it might be easier to try it first sitting and then move on to standing when you get comfortable with it. So she's going to lift up all 5 toes, spread them as far away from each other as she can, and then try to press them all down, keeping them really far away from each other. So that's the level 1. That's your basic. Try that one more time. It looks really good. Lift up, spread, and press all them down. Good. So once you get that basic move, then you can move on to being a little bit more fancy. So she's going to keep her big toe down and then lift 4 toes, the 4 little toes up. Good, and this one is much harder. And then she's going to try to spread those little toes out. Good, and press those back down. Good, press those all, there you go, good. Now keep those down, and can you lift up that big toe? This is very, very hard. Good, and she can do it. So if you're trying this at home and you're having trouble, I recommend go ahead and put that toe down. That if you give it just a little bit of assistance as you're starting out, and kind of help that toe and see if you can hold it, and then it makes it a little bit easier to get started with that exercise. There's all kinds of variations. You can switch back and forth between big toe and little toes. Oh no, we're gonna do one more with the foot, yes. And you can even kind of do scales where you lift up all the toes and try pressing down one toe at a time. But that's next level stuff. But that's a good way to start strengthening your foot intrinsics. And then the other one I'm gonna have Maria show is the short foot. So you want to turn that way, good, all right. So it kind of starts the same way. I'd like you to start with kind of splaying those toes and pressing them down. And then the key to this is you're going to try to pick up your arch muscle like you're making a tiny little cave. Good. That's a pretty small movement. And you can see now we see this nice little space underneath her arch. And she's not curling her toes. So it's going to be a smaller movement than you want it to be, where you're just really picking up the arch and you're going to feel a strong pull in this muscle right here. Good, good. And if you curl your toes, you might miss out on that muscle. So this is the other foot exercise I really like. And once you master that, you can work on fancier things. So why don't you face the camera? So she's going to create what I call like an active foot. So she's going to splay her toes, try to lift her arch up. Yeah, press them back down. Good. Lift that arch up. And then she's going to keep that shape while she tries to do a little mini squat. And then push away. So you can do squats on 2 legs. And then if you get really fancy, you can even try to balance on 1 leg. And you lift up your left leg. Good. And try to keep that active foot. And you can play around with tapping your heel in front and lifting it back up, just so we can practice different tibial angles over that ankle. Good. So those are my favorite exercises for the feet. And now I'd like to also talk about how to bring those toe flexors into your heel rise. So this is the one. Can we go over to the wall for this one? Okay. So we're going to come on over here. So you want to take a towel and you're going to roll it up to give yourself a little platform to stand on. And you're going to put it near a wall. And then come on over here, Maria, and you're going to try to do that lift and splay so that all of your toes, all 10 toes, are kind of splayed out on that towel. Good. So when you're just getting started, the first step is to kind of lean into the wall a little bit. And then you're going to lift your heels, but keep pressing your toes into the towel. Good. And then slowly lower back down. Good. And so you can do like 10 or 15 of those. Take breaks, kind of relax your toes and re-splay them every once in a while. And then can you feel how that activates a little bit more on the underside of your arch? Feel it right here. Yes, yes, yes. And then when you get super advanced in that, you can try it without the towel and kind of do a little running man action here. So lift and splay, press those toes in, good, and then come back down. So this is kind of getting closer to a more propulsive move, more of a plyometrics that you would need for running. Good, one more time. Push that big toe into the ground, beautiful. And all the way back down. Very, very nice. So those are my favorite foot strengtheners for propulsions. And then the last thing I'd like to talk about, if we still have a little bit of time, is ankle stability. So we'll go back to the slides for just a moment. Okay, so we need to have good stability in our ankles in case we accidentally step on a rock that moves from underneath us, right? It's really important, I think, to train ankle stability if you're going to be running on trails or hiking on trails. It is actually the one evidence-based intervention. If you are training ankle stability, you're less likely to get an ankle sprain. So there's a couple of muscles that are really important for this. Next slide. So we have a lot of play sort of like kind of on the side to side or medial lateral plane in the ankle. And that is good because it helps us conform to different surfaces when we're walking, but that mobility does leave us vulnerable to too much movement there if we come down at the wrong angle, and that can cause a sprain. So the muscles we think of training when we think of improving that ankle stability are the muscles that go on the side of our ankle. So on the outside of the ankle, you have your peroneals, and then on the inside of your ankle, you have your tibialis posterior. And I've got one more slide. So this is just to give you an idea of kind of what those muscle groups do. So if you are pulling your ankle, kind of moving your toes away from the midline, that's ankle eversion as shown in the picture on the left. And so those are your peroneals. And then if you are pulling against a resistance, kind of pulling your toes in towards the midline, that's ankle inversion. So that's more of your tibialis posterior. And exercises like these, where you're pulling against a band, are a nice starting point for training those muscles, especially if you've never really, thought about working them before, or if you're recovering from an injury. But for people that are going back to the trail, I'd like to think about ways that we can work these a little bit more functionally in a way that mimics more like what you're going to be doing on the trail. So I'm going to have Maria demonstrate that for us. Okay, yeah, so she's going to stand, pick a foot and just stand on one leg. So this is sort of the first step, and you can see she's really, really good at this. So Maria practicing just standing on one leg isn't going to make her any better. It's not going to make her ankles any more stable. So I'm going to go through a progression so that you can figure out at home what's the right level for you. So if this is challenging for you, do it near a countertop, something where you can use your hands to support you in case you lose your balance. But if this is easy, then you can try keeping your balance while you move and kind of do little circles with your other leg. And you see how our ankle is starting to wobble a little bit more. That's what we want. We need those wobbles to get stronger. So if you're not wobbling, it's not hard enough. So this is pretty good, but we could make it even harder. So I'm going to have you do the same thing on a piece of foam. Okay, be careful so it doesn't slide underneath you. So same idea. She's gonna find her balance. And this is much harder. So if you don't have a piece of foam at home, sometimes you can find a pillow that does the same thing. And this makes the whole leg work pretty hard, not just the ankle. And then if you don't have any equipment at all, go ahead and come off that foam. This is also a nice test of your ankle stability. So she's going to get her balance going. You can pick either leg if you want to give that one a break. There we go. So once you get your balance, now I want you to lift up your heel just a little bit. Good. It doesn't have to go super high, but just try to keep it and to hold it there. Oh, okay. Yeah, even if it's just a little bit. Good. That is a lot harder. Yes, that is a lot harder. And that is really similar to the position that your ankle is going to need to be in as you are pushing off when you're running or walking. And depending on your running stride, that also might be your landing position. So this is actually probably the most important position to train their ankle stability in. So if this is hard, just, hang out there for a while, feel the wobbles, feel what that does to the body on top of your legs. So sometimes people will try to rescue it by moving their trunk or the hips. Yeah, good. That's very hard. But if you can do that, then you know that your ankles are going to be able to protect you when you, land in a slightly different way if you're running on the trails. How are we doing on time? Good. Okay. So I am going to go, it's my last thing. At the end of a long foot workout, I really like to do tennis ball massage. I think that working on the muscles in the feet, it helps keeps everything supple. It's really good for all those little foot intrinsics. And then I also like to carry a tennis ball with me in my hiking pack so that if I stop for lunch, I'll pick up my boots and then I'll use a tennis ball to massage my feet. So this is probably going to be another one where we need to zoom in on the feet. I'm gonna have you take that ball and can you put it on, and I think, use your right foot. Good. And we're just gonna put it let's put it right at the back of the arch if you can. Yes. And then if you can put your heels down and kind of relax down. So there's a really nice trigger point underneath that arch muscle that you can get. So if the ball is right in front of your heel bone, that's a really good place. And she's showing her foot in front of her body just so you guys can see. But go ahead and bring your standing leg forward if you can, so your feet are side by side. Try to keep both feet underneath you and you'll be able to control the pressure a little bit more. Good, and then you can move your standing leg back a little bit, good. And so then the next place is if you move this ball, right underneath those metatarsals, so kind of your toe knuckles. And you can try to get the force of the ball almost like it's going between your big toe and your second toe knuckle. And then you can move it over and go between your second toe knuckle and your third toe knuckle. Kind of keep moving it over, and even kind of wiggle your foot side to side on that ball. That's a really nice release for those metatarsals. Good, and then a nice massage for that plantar fascia is you can roll the ball from your heel all the way to your big toe. And this is where it gets squirrely. Sometimes the ball wants to run away. Try to bring that ball a little closer to your body if you can. Yes, there you go. So there you go. And then kind of just roll along from heel to big toe. And you can trace from heel to your second toe. Good, so you're kind of hitting all the points of the foot. Good, and then when you're finished with that, you can just kind of roll it around wherever it feels like it needs a little love, just to let those muscles relax. And then you do that with the other foot. So those are my top exercises for keeping the feet and ankles healthy as we return to the trails. And I think now we'll bring the rest of the team in for the Q&A. Should I read the announcements? Yes.
Hey, thank you very much. That was excellent. I mean, what I like about that is this is saved on the Valley View website somewhere. So now, basically, if you have problems or if you want to get into optimal condition, you can just follow that program. I mean, that's pretty handy to have there.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, excellent.
All right. First question, are custom orthotics really worth it?
Maria? So, so that's, I think it's really hard to answer that without knowing what you're getting them for. There are certain indications, as we say, there are certain indications, people who would do really, really well with custom orthotics, absolutely worth it. There are others who probably don't need them, frankly. Studies on just a huge population base who have, say, fasciitis have not shown that, without more specific reasons to get the custom orthotics, they have not shown that everybody needs custom orthotics for plantar fasciitis. So the answer is there are some problems where you absolutely 100% they are worth it, and other problems where I would say you do just as well to get generalized support. What do you think?
I agree. I don't think everyone needs them. I think some people, if they're having pain, that's something that you can try, and it could help the problem. But if you're not having pain, I definitely wouldn't add it.
What do you think of toe spacers and what are they for?
Okay, so I'm gonna take this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a close relationship with toe spacers, so if you have a bunion, toe spacers can actually really help a lot. In a former life, I was a dancer and I wore a toe spacer 24/7, and it really helped take the pressure off of that big toe. If bunions are a problem, toe strengthening is really important for you as well. And if you can figure out how to activate the muscle that makes your toe abduct or kind of pull to the midline of your body, then that can help too. Again, it's not something that everyone needs. If you feel like your big toe is pushing, so the toe spacers typically go between the first and second toe to take pressure off of that first toe joint. I've also seen people wear them between their smaller toes in the case of friction. So pain because you got a corn or a callus in there that's just grinding. They do make these thin silicone toe spacers. Not something that everyone needs, but it's something that you can use if you feel like you're having foot pain. If you are getting a lot of pain in the bunion, it's probably a good idea to look at the shape of your shoe. And if it's too tapered for your foot, that could be putting pressure on your big toe. And then if you had a wider toe box, that would give your toe a little bit more room, and you might not even need the toe spacer.
And everyone knows what a bunion is, I assume. It's where the big toe leans in toward the second toe and there's a big bump at the base of the big toe joint. I would imagine going on point for many people would be impossible if they didn't have something to kind of line that big toe up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say sometimes toe spacers, the one thing you gotta watch out for, they can make your shoe, if it's a little tight, feel a little tighter. So you gotta make sure you have plenty of room in your shoe. Or they may cause a little friction on the side of your toe. For the pinky toe, there's kind of the opposite problem. We call it a bunionette, where the pinky toe rubs up against the fourth toe. And that creates some of the more painful problems I see. I mean, that little corn between your fourth and fifth toes, that will light people up. It'll drive them crazy. And toe spacers, they can help with that also. So they can be quite useful. What do you think of yoga toes? You know, where people used to use those big wide spacers at night to stretch their feet.
Yep, I love them, but you can't wear them all the time. So it's a nice stretch, especially if you feel like your toes are compressed and you've been used to wearing pretty pointy shoes. They can really be comfortable, and they feel really good, kind of all up into the bones, kind of going up your foot. Not necessary to buy the yoga toes though. You can use your fingers, you can interlace your fingers between your toes and do a nice little mobilization that way. I've also had people, roll up a thin towel or like a dishcloth and kind of braid it through their toes and then have them do little ankle movements as a similar release. But yeah.
Younger people tend to be able to spread their toes fairly easily. Over time, they can become almost calcified, where those toes are so rigid. And I think that leads to a lot of the symptoms that we see. People who have a similar looking foot when they're younger as when they get a little older, and all of a sudden you have a lot of symptoms from it when you get older. I think it's because of the rigidity that sets in. And so keeping them flexible, I think is great. Keeping them flexible in all directions, including the spread. Now, not all of us are genetically gifted like Maria and Jessica and can actually spread our toes or do the short foot exercise. There is no connection between my brain and those muscles, but I think that can even be activated, right, with proper training.
Yeah, I think I could teach you how to do the short foot.
That would be quite a challenge.
Challenge accepted.
Okay.
Someone is asking what to do with a frozen toe.
Which toe?
They mean thermally frozen or stiff? Stiff? Okay. Well, a stiff toe, well, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say my piece because then you'd be the one to actually mobilize. But there are some problems you don't want to try to mobilize aggressively by cranking on them. When you're just banging bone spurs together and you've got kind of an arthrosed, we call it, joint, I don't think you should actively try to push through those bone spurs, because the ligamentous support around your big toe, for example, is so strong that you'll actually bruise your cartilage before you'll ever break down that ligamentous, barrier. So there are ways to mobilize it with distraction that can be done by a professional. I wouldn't recommend people try to force their way through it at home, but it's my take.
Will these exercises help prevent stress fractures?
I would say the most important thing for preventing stress fractures is gradual training and not trying to increase your mileage too quickly, making sure you're giving yourself adequate rest between training sessions, I think is the most important thing for stress fractures. I mean, they won't hurt, but I think your training program is the most important thing for that.
Will hiking boots with a high top support more ankle support?
So they will give your ankle more support. People go back and forth about whether that's a good thing. It's kind of like the minimalistic running shoe versus the high support running shoe. I think it's very much a personal preference on what you prefer. If you have more flexible ankles, if you've had a lot of ankle sprains in the past, you might want to have a higher boot so that you have that support. There's purists out there that might say, no, you have to have the muscles to support no matter what, and having too much support discourages some of the muscles. So I mean, I guess in theory it could make you a little bit less strong, but I think it's more on what makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, don't start hopping through boulder fields in unprotected shoe gear if you're a beginner. Just like what you're saying about stress fractures, I think the same thing goes. You have to train up to a level of strength that allows you to, safely scramble over like the scree and stuff like that. So if you're a beginner, you don't have a lot of ankle strength, you haven't done a lot of these trainings, you might want to have that extra protection. That's what I would say.
Should we rotate shoes daily?
For training?
Yeah, I don't. And not everyone can do that. I guess if you're putting a really high amount of mileage on your shoes, that could extend the wear of your shoes a little bit. But if you're doing 4 or 5 miles a day, it's probably not necessary. But if you're doing a lot more, then it could extend the life of your shoes.
Think it has any physiological benefits? I can't think.
No, yeah, if you're using like different like models of shoe,
Yeah.
give you different kinds of support, that I don't know.
I'd be cautious with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it if you're using a shoe that's very similar in its support features and its cushioning and stuff like that. But I think changing shoes up too much could potentially injure you, give you friction blisters if nothing else. So.
Could compression socks cause foot issues?
If they are too tight.
I was gonna say.
If they're too tight, some of us have bigger calf muscles than others. I actually can't wear most compression socks, and my toes go numb because they're just too tight on my calf muscles. So I would say that would be the only thing. Is if they're too tight and you're not getting good blood flow, then that's not a good thing. But otherwise, I love compression socks, and I think they're great.
And maybe watch some of the fabrics, which tend to be not very breathable, so you can get some skin injury from that also.
Skiing and snowboarding, does it make you more prone to injuries when returning to the trails or running?
These are great questions.
Well, I would say more prone to it. I mean, if you're ignoring if you're ignoring the transition exercises in preparation for it, then I could see that happening. But there's nothing inherently that damages your feet in skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah.
They also don't train you for trail running, so you can't, that's what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, you're using your leg muscles, so in a way it's keeping your body strong. It's probably better than doing nothing all winter. But yeah, I don't think we have any data that makes you more prone to getting injured, but it is a different type of activity, You can't assume that because you've been skiing so many feet, daily during the winter that you're going to be ready to do a 100-mile run the next day.
Is a wide toe box shoe important to foot health?
So it is important to have a shoebox that is wide enough for your foot, but it shouldn't be a lot wider either. So you want enough room for your toes to wiggle, and there are people out there that really like a lot of room for wiggling toes. But I will say that if it's too wide, it's almost like you have clown shoes, and you might be more prone to tripping on a trail. That's been my experience.
I think that's absolutely true. One thing you don't want is a shoe that's wide. You're like, you can get a shoe that's too narrow and it will injure you. A shoe that's too wide, you will slide back and forth in and you'll just get injured a different way. Your toes will pack into the front when you're coming downhill and it will injure you. So you've got to have a shoe that's fairly snug, at least that holds on your foot well, whether that's through a good arch contact, laces that can be snugged up appropriately. But it can't be too tight on the ball of the foot. Shouldn't be like a ski boots.
Do supportive shoes weaken your foot muscles?
Yes. I mean, I think that's objectively true. I mean, if you put a foot in a very supportive shoe day in, day out all your life, I think the intrinsic muscles that you were talking about, which is amazing, short footage, those muscles are weakened by that. Would you agree? I'm not sure it's always a bad thing. There's a trade-off there, but I do feel like they are probably more quiet. If you put a muscle, some kind of a muscle activity indicator in there, probably a little more quiet when you're in very supportive shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people's feet are so many different shapes. And I think of people that have supportive shoes that also help them get their big toe down when they're walking, that otherwise they couldn't. And so without the support, they're not using those muscles. So I don't know. I don't think that's a straightforward question. So I wouldn't want anyone to think, walk away saying, well, I need to get rid of all the support in my shoe. But there are people who really like the barefoot running and that minimalist style, and that works really well for them. But we every time they try to compare minimalist shoes to super supportive shoes, there's no difference in injury rate so.
Oh yeah, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm advocating for not wearing supportive shoes. I'm just saying that, yeah, the intrinsic muscles of your foot, unless you're working on them in some way, through dance or through the exercises, they're probably a little more quiet in a very supportive shoe. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't wear that. You still prevent certain types of injuries. Very, very common in people who, especially if you try to make the transition to a minimalist shoe after not having worn one and you're 50 years old, it's going to be a disaster. Stress fractures, tendonitis, and all kinds of things.
What about zero drop shoes?
That sounds like Jessica's got that.
Again, it's a personal preference. They can for the wrong foot, they're kind of putting you at a little bit of a disadvantage, but for the right foot, they can take some of the pressure, I think, off of the Achilles. So I think if it's something that you've tried and you like, I think you'll know. Put some miles on them and see if you see how they work. But they work for some people, but it's not a panacea at all.
How do you find the best shoes for your feet?
I'm not going to mention any retailers in the area, but I definitely think a good source is Runner's World. They usually list several shoes based on foot type. So you may have to know something about your foot first. You have to know if you're a severely overpronated foot type, if you have a really, really high arch. You need to know a little bit about your foot. And then Runner's World tends to be a good source if you're a runner. What else do you use?
Yeah, advice from local retailers, where you can go into a store and try a bunch of them, or even run a little bit or walk a little bit on a treadmill just to see how it feels. But it's probably a lot of trial and error. I've been wearing the same brand, same model of running shoe for like 20 years. A PT put me in them a long time ago, and I tried something different once and I didn't like it, and so you find something you like, just kind of stick with it.
That's great if they don't change the manufacturing so much. Like every shoe that you love, they don't make it again the next year. It seems like.
Yeah, I really lucked out.
Like the Asics Gel Kayano is now on what, iteration 31 or 32 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it changed drastically a few years ago. It suddenly became a real maximalist shoe, and a lot of people found that they couldn't wear it with the same success that they could before. So yeah, you always just trial and error. She said a few times, and I agree with it.
All right, last question. Where do you guys see patients and how do I schedule an appointment?
Is that a real question? Good. Go ahead.
If you feel like you need PT, we do need a doctor's referral. So you might have to see either a doctor like Dr. Armstrong, who's specific to feet, or sometimes you can even go to your primary care if you're having a problem, and they can write you a prescription. They'll ask you where you want to go. Where I'm at the hospital and the Glenwood Springs location in Valley View, but Valley View has physical therapy all up and down the valley. So we have several locations. There might be another one that's more convenient to you.
And that's true in this valley. A lot of the primary cares are pretty athletic and they know a lot about these kinds of things and can be a good source for referrals. Maria, why don't you tell them where we see patients?
We go to Glenwood, Willits, and Sill, so you can find us through there. You can have a referral, and Aspen. You can have a referral, but you can just schedule an appointment with us and then we'll get you in.
Check with your insurance to see if you need a referral.
Yeah, that too.
And then I've been asked to say that our team would love to hear your feedback on today's presentation. If you have the time to fill out a quick survey, it will appear right after the webinar has ended. You will receive an email with the recording of the webinar within the next 24 hours. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you.